So for our Haftara today, I get to invite someone I know very well. Yeah, my wife, Ricki. The wind beneath my wings.
So Rita's going to join me for the reading of Hannah. But before we read the story, and before we reread the story, as we read it every year, I'd like to share a few thoughts. Hannah gives us silent, personal, direct prayer to God. She teaches us to be open to the love around us, that we can each have our own direct relationship that can be life-affirming and life-changing if we find our own path to accessing it. The story reminds us that one path to ridding ourselves of bitterness in our lives is by addressing the pain honestly and openly in our hearts. She also teaches the importance of speaking up for oneself. Hannah reminds us of the power of words. As we are taught time and time again in Torah and in life, words matter. They can create the world, they can hurt, they can heal. In Hannah's story, the power of words to hurt, to stand up for oneself, and the power of silent internal heart words moves the story. As we read, Hannah is distraught by her inability to conceive, a story we read every year as we bring in the new year, as we are called to turn again. This is a difficult story for many reasons, including for women like me who never conceived and feel judged by that reality. As the story opens, after we are given the lineage of Elkanah, her husband, of course we're given the man's lineage, we find out that Hannah is hurt by the words of Peninnah, Elkanah's other wife, who gave him 2 sons. Once again, in our wisdom tradition, women are pitted against each other, Sarah, Hagar. But I digress. Each year at the time of sacrifice, it becomes too hard for her. And the text states, and so it happened, whenever she went up to the house of the Eternal One, her rival would provoke her, and she wept and would not eat. This is followed by the words of her husband. Her husband would say to her, "Why are you weeping, and why won't you eat? Why is your heart troubled? Am I not worth more to you than 10 children? She's dealing with her grief of infertility every year when they go to the temple, and we can only imagine how the taunts drove her to depression, crying and not eating. However, we are then shown the power of loving words, the loving words of her husband, which I believed helped her to continue on year after year, and then finally to gather additional strength to act. This time, she gathers the strength to get up, to eat, to drink, and then on her own, with no discussion, goes into the temple and addresses her bitterness of the soul. We know that Hannah is desperate in wanting to fulfill her concept of being a woman, conceiving a child, a male child. She makes a vow, "Give me a son, and I will give him back to you, to exist with you." So she prays with all her heart as she makes this vow, as she pours out her bitterness and her grief. She's then confronted by the priest, who believes she is drunk, as her lips are moving but her voice cannot be heard. Ah, silent prayer. She stands up for herself as she tells him she is a woman sore in spirit, for I was only pouring out my soul to God. He feels her pain, her heart, and tells her to go in peace and ask God to grant her petition. Why does he believe her? Is it because her grace shines through? It's interesting to note that the name Hannah means grace. She then leaves, and we are told she ate and no longer was she troubled. This I experience as the lesson, the wisdom of this tale. Her prayer has not been answered, but she knows somehow that she has been heard. Words of the heart matter. We are being shown that her ability to pour out her heart and articulate her pain to her God has helped her move on. She found a place and a space within herself and within her community where communication with her God was possible. It is where she found it possible to believe in change. As when she leaves, she is no longer sad. And take note that the rabbis choose her to teach us about silent prayer, a woman in a house of prayer, not separated, but separate in her pain and her longing. Hannah's sadness and bitterness left her when she was able to openly address her bitterness, of the soul, and we all know that bitterness, if left to fester, minimizes how we become, can keep us angry and blind to love and the beauty that surrounds us. There's also the importance of family and community in enabling that change. Her husband's concern reminds her she is loved. The temple gives her a physical space to go, to find her God, to address her pain, her bitterness. I recently watched an amazing documentary on Sidney Bernstein directed by Ethan Hawke, world-class pianist who left performing for teaching. Fascinating life. He used the term spiritual reservoir for how he experiences what some may call God, and Hannah certainly dips into that reservoir. Every year we hear this story, reminding us of the power of articulating our pain to God, however we envision our God and wherever we can find our God. I hope this year that each of us are able to find a space within this community to articulate our pain and suffering and to find a way to let go of old pains, to open our hearts and minds to the potential that surrounds us. So now, I invite you to sit back as Rita and I read the story and let the images come of a place and a space open to us all. There was a certain man from Ramatayim Sophim amid the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Yeroham. And he was the son of Eliyahu, who was the son of Tohu, who was the son of Sphuf and Ephratite. He had 2 wives. The first one's name was Hannah, the second one was called Peninnah, and Peninnah had 2 sons, but Hannah had no sons.
That man would go up from his town from time to time to worship and to offer sacrifice to the Creator of the multitudes of heaven at Shiloh. There were Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Pinchas, priests to the Eternal One. And on that occasion, Elkanah would offer sacrifice and give gifts to Peninnah and to all his sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, though God had closed her womb. Her rival used to taunt her and provoke her for the sake of causing her distress about the fact that God had closed her womb.
And so it happened, year by year, whenever she went up to the house of the Eternal, her rival would provoke her, and she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Why are you weeping, Hannah, and why won't you eat? And why is your heart troubled? Am I not worth more to you than 10 children?"
And once, after she ate and drank at Shiloh, Hannah arose, and Eli the priest was sitting at his station at the doorway of the house of the Eternal One, and she was in a bitter mood, and prayed to the Eternal while she wept and wept. She made a vow and said, "Creator of the multitudes of heaven, if truly you behold your servant's state of need, if you remember me and don't forget your servant, if you give your servant woman human seed, then I shall dedicate my child to the Eternal for a lifelong service, and no shears shall touch his head of hair."
And while she prayed at length before the omnipresent one, Eli caught sight of her moving her lips. Because Hannah was speaking to herself and only her lips were moving, while her voice could not be heard, Eli mistook her for a drunk. And Eli said to her, "How can you be drunk like this? Put away your wine." But Hannah answered, saying, "No, my lord, I am a woman sore in spirit, and no wine or liquor have I drunk, for I was only pouring out my soul to God. Do not mistake your servant for a wanton woman, for I was just now speaking out of great preoccupation and distress."
And Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you ask, whatever you request from God." And she replied, "So may your servant woman merit favor in your eyes." The woman then departed on her way. She ate, and no longer was she troubled.
The woman then departed on her way. She ate, and no longer was she troubled. And they rose early the next morning, and they worshiped before the omnipresent one, and they returned back to their house in Ramah, and Elkanah was intimate with Hannah his wife, and God remembered her.